Welcome back. If you're following the churn project I've been working on, it's came a deep freeze and slowed the project down. So we actually got a little bit of a warm spell and temperatures got up to 30 degrees, and we was able to glue this chair back together in the restoration process. So we're going to show you. We actually got the corner wedge back in. We was able to glue the broken wedge back together. We was able to put the original nails, use the original nails and put them back in. Came into one problem here. We had a nail going from here into here, and we had to pull that out. It's a little bit of a challenge because it had been sunk in there for many years, and they'd covered it over with many different types of varnishing. So this is what we got done. We got these two pegs in and got them glued. We got the two on the back side coming this way, and then we got the two pegs that's going in here. We made the broken ones, and then we kept their original ones that was still good, glued all this together, and was able to tighten up this gap here. Got it back tightened up. Then on the other side, it was able to tighten up the gap back here. Got all this tightened up and got this piece put back. So it's all back tightened up. Then this chair is too old to try to fully disassemble it, so we're gonna just put it together, and then we're gonna work these blemishes out. These are just little nick marks where stuff has hit the finish over the years and caused little spots in it. What we'll do is we'll sand that off and just touch it up with a new finish that's the same type of finish that's been put on it. Got all of this. We've got all this side tightened up, and it's really strong. There's no flex or move in it. Now on the other side, we've got to tighten this back up. You can see how deep this groove is. If you take a screwdriver, you can see just how deep this groove is. But we've got some little bitty nails right here going this direction into there, so we got to work these nails out. Then we've got 4 nails in this wedge that we got to work out, and then we had to take this bracket out from here. This bracket they've put it in because the glue has came out in here, so this was separating, so they put a bracket in here, and then they put nails up here trying to hold it together instead of gluing it back. So we got this L-shaped bracket off, but that wasn't the hard part. This was the hard part. We got into these little screws that was rusted in, and we had to take and slowly turn them out by hammering them with a hammer. But we got them out without stripping the screw holes, in case if we wanted to put them back we could, but most likely we're going to plug these holes, sand this and clean this up, because once we glue this we won't need these L-shaped brackets anymore. So what we're going to be working on next is trying to get these 3 nails out up here and get these 4 nails out of this wedge and get this wedge out. Then we'll be able to get to the pegs here and the pegs there, and then we'll be able to get to the ones that's up here. And then once we glue this back together, it'll tighten all these seams back up and it won't move for a pretty good while. The old glue was basically just pine resin, pine tar they just boiled it and they made like a pine pitch and wedged it in there, and it held up for a while, but it's not as strong as modern wood glue that we have today. So the brackets was probably required for the time period at the time, but nowadays with modern wood glue technology, we got waterproof wood glue and all these strong wood glues. So once we take this seam back up and we get this glued in, this corner wedge nailed back in, we won't need no nails or no brackets with modern wood glue. But these are, there's sections of oak that's been sawed, glued together. You've got 1, 2, 3, possibly 4, and then you've got an oak veneer over top of that. So if you're wondering how they made these style of chairs, this is a oak veneer that's over top of it, so you don't want to get too aggressive with trying to refinish this because you can get into some problems. This is a type of finish that's real dry. It's not an oil-based finish like polyurethane. It's stronger than shellac, so it's probably some kind of other finish. I'll have to do some more testing on it to figure out what it is. I know it's not shellac and I know it's not polyurethane, but it does keep the wood very dry. So I'm going to try to keep this type of finish, because with this wood veneer you don't want it taking in any kind of moisture, so you want it sealed as good as you can get it when redoing it. Now these panels are very thin and they're just a veneer over top of a very thin like plywood that's been put together, and they don't glue in, they just set inside of a notch that's cut into this, so they do kind of slide around and move. But yeah, that's the original style of assembly. Now some of these chairs would have had the spring bottom in them, but this one I'm not seeing evidence of spring bottom in it. I'm not real sure how the original bottom went in, but from my experience with how it was originally redone, they'd put a piece of plywood in. So probably been a piece of oak veneer plywood that's went in this. They've replaced it probably in the 60s, 70s sometime. The pine plywood. The original one was probably some type of thin board like this that was a plyboard with a oak veneer on it. This has most likely been the bottom to this chair. Here's where the problem comes in trying to figure out how to upholster this style chair. It's got arms on it. These you can't wrap. Like a normal chair, you can't wrap nothing into the sides of this chair. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to keep this piece of plywood. We took the springs off because the springs brought the chair bottom up to here, which was way too high. And how we know this is by this gap right here. Your cushion should stay somewhere around that gap line in the back. So what we're going to do is we're either going to put a type of vinyl covering over this and just slide this back in, and then we'll put glue in tabs holding it in on the sides, or we will wrap it with this type of fabric. And just kind of make a shelf in the bottom. This would probably be the most sensible way of doing this. It won't take a whole lot of money and won't be a headache. Is just wrap it in this type of fabric. And then when we get to the top part, just make a thin cushion out of a vinyl style leather and set it on top of this. That's the quickest way and the simplest way that I know to do this style, because there's nowhere to nail into the sides, there's nowhere to really nail into the bottoms, and there's no existing places. So this was most likely how it was originally. So we're just going to put the plywood back in, wrap it, make a small thin cushion, and make it come up to the bottom of this. And that'll be the way to just cover this up. There's no evidence of anything being put in the bottom of this chair. There's no nail holes or no evidence of spring bottoms, no webbing or nothing like that. It could be put in if you wanted to do that, but this kind of, if you had this style of chair bottom with the board this thick, you could easily put a spring in. Actually, I have a spring available. I'll show you. So if you was to put webbing in the bottom of the chair like this, if you had a chair like this style bottom, you could put a spring in. Now after you put webbing in, your spring would probably sit about that high. It wouldn't be really tall, but you would have a problem trying to tie in on these sides. You have a problem trying to wrap this. You'd have to come up with a special method of tying and wrapping this. And this is why I didn't go with springs. It's because this would be too big of a challenge of trying to get around. So it'd be easier just to put a shelf in and go with how the original upholsterer was working, how he was originally doing it back in the old days. That was his method. Most likely he'd copied the original piece that was missing out of here. It was probably broken or something. He probably didn't have access to the same type of wood, so he probably just made it out of plywood. And he's probably made the same style of bottom, most likely. Once we wrap the bottom in this type of fabric, that'll cover up the fabric and make it more smooth. Then we can put a leather bottom, cushion bottom, and just slide it in and just set it there. There wouldn't be no need for tying it down anyway or tacking it down or anything like that. You just use it like a couch cushion, slide it in, because these sides would be a big problem trying to figure out how to tie anything in on these sides. If these sides were open, you could wrap the chair. It'd be a lot easier. But this style of chair, it's probably just been a thin cushion that's slid in. It's just laid in the bottom. So we're going to just kind of follow along with how it was being done back in the old days. We're just going to follow along with the same idea that they were going with. And then once we do that, clean up the finish a little bit and just use it like it is. Get into stripping some of these panels and messing with some of this real thin stuff. It's got veneer on it. You can get in a whole world of trouble. Once moisture gets into this veneer, especially as old as it is, it will definitely start stripping out, start peeling off. So you can see how it'll start. If I can find another piece of old furniture that's got the same veneer, I can take and cut this line right here and chisel this bottom half off and put a small piece off of another old piece of furniture that's no good and cover this mess up here. But at the time being, not got access to any old furniture that has this type of veneer that will match. But that is going to be the next stage in the process of putting this together.